why do bad things happen to good people? I know it is one of those things as we go through life, we see these types of things happening. A wonderful person we know, a neighbor who's always helping people, who's kindly, suddenly something happens. Maybe they meet with a car accident. We feel like, wow, that's terrible, And that is, of course, one of any number of examples where we perceive that something obviously bad happened to somebody who's obviously good. Well, usually what happens is we are looking at a very small sampling of what's happening in any person's life when we see this. Even if you've known a person their whole life, really the whole life is actually, in the grand scheme of things, a very tiny slice. The image that comes to mind for me is, imagine if you go to, a library and pull out a volume, right? A really fat volume. You pull it out and you just randomly read one page in that book. That is what one lifetime is like, right? It's just like one page in this hundreds of pages. So even if we look at somebody's life, somebody we know, what we're seeing is a very tiny slice. And really that goes to show that there's a lot that's been happening in that person's past, and their growth trajectory is something we cannot see in an obvious way just by knowing them casually in this life. So because of that, we may not understand that what happened, let's say it's a car accident, we see that as obviously bad, but we cannot see that in the very big picture, that was actually something that was beneficial for that person's growth. So in fact, these terms, good and bad, we start seeing them a little differently. What is ultimately good and what is ultimately bad? Sometimes our definition of good and bad tends to be based on what seems immediately inconvenient and difficult is seen as bad. We start changing our definition of good and bad as we start understanding growth. Really, anything that's beneficial for somebody's growth, in a sense, is a good thing in a grander scheme of things. And so when we look at it that way, we find that actually what's happening around us is actually, is good things are happening. Good things are happening. It's just that we cannot make that connection. And so over time, we have to develop that trust that these are not arbitrary things, arbitrary bad things happening, but in fact, they're meaningful things. And sometimes, you probably already experienced this, where you saw something happen, like suddenly a person loses a job. It seems like very unfortunate that now, they have to deal with many challenges. But fast forward 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you suddenly see that, wait a minute, that led to them re-examining some of their career goals, and then that led to them perhaps choosing an entrepreneurial route, and then that led to some incredible successes. So what was bad at one moment is seen as, wow, this was great, 5 years later. So this perspective, I think, we start seeing more and more. And we develop a trust in it such that even when we don't know, we still inwardly know that this is going to lead to something good. So that's the perspective on why bad things, supposedly bad things, are happening to good people. When you choose light, life becomes increasingly joyful, purposeful, and inspired. I invite you to join me to explore the realms of light, the infinite possibilities that light offers.